The first thing I would advise is to be clear in your mind what you're asking for. So what you need help with. It may be that you feel completely lost and unsure. What it is you're concerned about. What would you like to happen? Do you feel that your relationship has broken down irretrievably? Or do you feel that it hasn't and you just want a bit of advice because you think it might break down soon? And it'd be useful to know, if you're coming to us for advice about financial matters, what there is in terms of finances. So if you own a house together, do you roughly know how much that house is worth? Do you roughly know how much is outstanding on the mortgage? What about other assets? Are there bank accounts, pensions, debts, income for yourself and your partner or your spouse? What is there? That really helps us. If we have a broad idea of what there is at the outset, that really helps us give initial advice.
It helps to narrow down what you're going to be discussing.
It does,
and allows the person to get the best from their time with you.
Yes, yeah. And arrangements for children. So what are the current arrangements? We need to know if a separation's already happened. What are the current arrangements for the children? Is that something you're looking for advice about? Has there been a breakdown in communication in that regard? What would you like to happen? Do you have any concerns for the safety or welfare of the children?
Are people welcome to write to you via the website?
They are, yes.
And you'll happily take their call as well?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I think I'm correct in saying that your direct line is on the website, so occasionally people just ring you out of the blue, do they?
Yes, that does happen.
Help?
Yeah, or emails out of the blue. Yes, both of those things.
So imagining for a moment that I am in need of some advice, what's the typical process to get that ball rolling with you?
So once you've made contact with us, we would just give you the options really in terms of setting up an initial meeting, whether that's by telephone, in person or remotely, such as by Zoom, whichever works for you really.
Will I have to pay for that meeting?
You have two options for the meeting. So you can either have a free 30-minute consultation, which is typically over the telephone, or you could have a fixed fee initial meeting, which is £150 inclusive of VAT, and that would usually involve you coming into the office to meet with us here, or you could have a meeting by Zoom or Teams, or even over the telephone if that's what you'd prefer.
What's the difference between the two?
A fixed fee meeting doesn't have a length such as 30 minutes. It may be an hour, maybe an hour and a half, really depending on what you need. And so you'll get far more detailed advice within that meeting, and you'll be able to explain in more detail what your situation is. We can just cover more ground really in that meeting. You'll also get a follow-up letter of advice at no additional cost as well following the fixed fee consultation. Yeah.
I suppose I couldn't really get much covered in half an hour if it's general advice as well. So that's a difference too.
It is a difference. It can work for some people. Some people might like to have an initial 30-minute meeting just to put some initial points forward, get some initial advice with a view to coming in for a meeting in person or having a longer meeting at a later stage.
After that initial meeting with you, what typically happens next? I could imagine some people listening to this haven't crossed the bridge of divorce or separation in the past and may feel a little bit daunted. What's your general thoughts on what to expect?
It can absolutely feel daunting, completely, particularly if you haven't done anything like this before, and perhaps you've never spoken to a lawyer before, and certainly not about something like this. So after the initial meeting, you or a client should hopefully have a clear idea of what the legal position is initially and what the next steps are. So typically during a discussion, whether that's a free 30-minute meeting or the longer fixed fee consultation, the next steps would be discussed. So action plans, what are the objectives here? What do we need to be looking at? What are things to think about? And it may be that I would give someone things to think about during that discussion. So think about this or this, and then come back and discuss it. Or there may be things that somebody wants to raise at a later stage. Perhaps they just want to find out initially where they stand and get a rough idea of that, and then come back for more advice later on.
And I suppose one of the other issues I might be thinking about having been through this before, is all the form filling required?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
There is.
Do I need your help with that form filling, or is that mainly something that I will be doing myself?
Well, that's really up to you to some degree, and how much you would like our assistance. So you're not on your own when it comes to filling out forms, but sometimes it can help them, certainly in terms of cost, to minimise the cost to complete the form themselves, and perhaps for us to review the form and to
Right, you see mistakes.
Not necessarily mistakes, just to review it, to make amendments, because we complete these forms day in, day out, so we're very familiar with them. If using a scenario, if you were going through this process and I present you with a form to fill out, you may never have seen that form before, and you might quite understandably feel quite daunted or overwhelmed by the prospect of completing a lengthy form. So our role is to work, would be in this instance, to work with you to assist you in completing the form, and to suggest changes or things we would add or take away, depending on the nature of the document.
And now at this moment, if I put myself in that position again, I start thinking about how easy it's going to be to start falling out with my future ex. What do you do, if anything, to help me with that side of things? I think of in the past how divorce used to be about sending nasty letters to one another in the post, didn't it?
Yeah.
Has that all changed?
I think there has been a change, certainly. I mean, since I started practicing, there's much more of a focus now on trying to resolve things in a constructive and conciliatory way, as opposed to an adversarial or overly litigious way. So it's about trying to cooperate and just trying to reach an agreement that works for both parties. There isn't so much really an emphasis on winners and losers, and that they're not phrases that we would want to use or encourage. It's a difficult time for all concerned for different reasons, and it's important that some sort of common goal is established, if possible. Negotiations on both sides, that each person has the opportunity to put forward how they're feeling and what they want to achieve from a settlement or an arrangement for children, and it's trying to work with that to get something that's fair in the round, really, or people feel they can live with.
Yeah, so you mentioned feelings, achievements, and so on.
Yeah.
What about the emotions? They're often running high, I imagine, with the clients you see.
People, inevitably, when people separate or go through or divorces on the cards, people have different situations. So, for example, somebody might find themselves in a position where they want to initiate the separation, or they already have done, or they could be in a different position where they're on the receiving end of somebody who has separated from them or has said that they want the relationship to end. So depending on where you are and where you sit with that, will inform generally how you feel about these things, and how you manage that.
So you're not a counsellor, obviously.
We're not counsellors. No.
And it's best to not treat you as a counsellor, I would imagine.
Yes.
Can you point me in the right direction of experts if I need them?
Yes, certainly. We could point you in the direction of a divorce coach, somebody who isn't a lawyer, but somebody who will be aware of the legal procedures and the relevant forms, etc., and can provide that emotional support and some practical support there as well that we're not able to provide. People could go and see a counsellor if they are going through a separation and finding that very difficult. That can always be helpful.
What's collaborative law all about?
So collaborative law is all about resolving disputes concerning financial matters, children matters, or anything really, sort of family-related dispute in a particular way using the collaborative law process. And what that involves is two people with their individual lawyers having meetings around the table, what's known as a four-way meeting. And it is about identifying the issues in dispute and having a series of meetings to resolve those issues and reach an agreement.
What if things get a little bit awkward? Do you step in for me?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, what we would do before each meeting is agree an agenda, and it's preparation of documents, a statement called anchor statement to set out what's important to people as part of the process. And if there is a meeting around the table and things are a little bit tricky, then it may be that a timeout is appropriate. Just having a few moments away from that meeting, just to cool off, come back in, and then talk afresh, or maybe even postpone to another occasion.
So I can imagine if that meeting's going well and it's quite well prepared,
Yeah.
you could possibly sort everything out in a single meeting. Is that true, or is that a little bit ambitious?
Possibly. I mean, the collaborative law structure involves typically a series of meetings with different things being discussed at each meeting, sort of sequentially. But yes, in theory, it could be a couple of meetings where people agree. Yeah, and that's something that we would encourage.
Is it a way of saving money?
It can be, yes, as opposed to, say, going through the court process if other forms of resolving the dispute weren't successful. It is a way of resolving financial and or children matters without involving the court, and in a way that both parties feel heard, feel on equal footing, because they're all together in a room and everybody's talking and narrowing the issues. So yes, it can be more cost effective than, say, court proceedings, but there's other benefits to the collaborative process as well.
So generally speaking, once the process is reaching a conclusion,
Yes.
excuse my layperson's terminology here, does it need to go before a court regardless? Does the court have to have its say, or does collaborative skip that stage?
It's important for an agreement reached, certainly in relation to financial matters, to be presented to the court for approval, because then it becomes a legally binding agreement. And it means that, depending on the terms of the agreement, neither party can come back at a later stage and essentially try and renegotiate or strike a new deal.
Because I'm worse off, for example. I'd like some more, please.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
A couple of years ago, we all heard headlines about no-fault divorce.
Yes.
What's your take on that? Has it made a difference?
I think it has certainly made a difference in terms of essentially wiping out the animosity that was in place when you were preparing divorce petitions based on unreasonable behaviour. Because if in divorce proceedings, the divorce petition or divorce application, as it's now known, is the first step, and prior to the onset of no-fault divorce, the grounds, or the facts on which you could bring a divorce, were limited to periods of separation of 2 years or more, adultery or unreasonable behaviour. So if there had been no adultery, or people hadn't been separated for 2 years or more, you were left with a behaviour petition where you were required to list and itemise examples of the other person's behaviour. And there had to be enough in that petition for the court to be convinced the marriage had broken down irretrievably. But what that did was start the process off on a footing of criticism of the other person and discussions about behaviour. The no-fault divorce took away all of that. So there are reasons for the marriage breakdown do not even feature when going through a divorce now.
Much healthier. In the initial
stages, much healthier, much more conciliatory, and the fact that there's no blame just means that it's far more easier for people to commence the divorce process without the worry of having to say things about their spouse, which was in place before.
So what if there is fault, and I do want to talk about her adultery or something like that? Is there space for that now, or does no-fault divorce basically make that all somewhat irrelevant?
There is space for that in the context of talking to your lawyer about it. If that was something that had happened to you in this instance, and you wanted to talk about that, and it was something that you felt particularly strong about, then we would talk about it. But as far as the divorce is concerned, that wouldn't feature, no.
Doesn't really make a difference.
It doesn't really make a difference.
It's all about fairly dividing the finances and doing the best for the children.
Yeah, I think the no-fault divorce has taken the focus away from the reasons why the marriage is broken down, and now the divorce is a platform from which to start negotiations about financial matters, and there's no focus on why the marriage is broken down. We're really then just focusing on the finances, arrangements for children. So it's taken away that element of difficulty and animosity. It's actually mandatory now to attempt to resolve disputes without just initiating court proceedings. So that means going to mediation, having other forms of dispute resolution. There's lots of different things. There's private FDRs, early neutral evaluation, arbitration. There's lots of different things. But those are encouraged and required by the court. And in specific circumstances now, you have to fill out a form to send to the court before a court hearing to explain what attempts you've made.
All the things that you've tried to do.
Yeah.
So talking about mediation, if I'm going to divorce my partner, I need to go to mediation first before seeing you, or around the same time? Is there a timing issue at all here?
There's no timing issue. So you could contact a mediator before you come and see me and tell me that you've done that, or you could do that after we've spoken and I've spoken to you about the different options to resolve the particular dispute, which mediation is one of those. And you could follow up with mediation afterwards.
But I have to have done something like that. I have to try.
Yes, unless certain exemptions apply, which sometimes they do.
What sort of exemptions would they be?
If there are, for example, serious concerns about harm to a child, any delay in initiating a court process would be detrimental to the welfare of a child or children. If there's a jurisdictional issue, for example, it's not possible to attend.
Jurisdictional, as in different country.
Someone lives abroad, yes, and it's not possible to do any form of non-court dispute resolution. So there are exceptions, but generally speaking, yes, people are encouraged and required to.
Is this the same as relate? Does everybody have to go to relate or something like that before?
So relate. The role of relate, as I understand it, is the marriage guidance counselling. And quite often people may have already been to see relate or another such organisation before they come to see us because of difficulties in the relationship or the marriage, which they've tried to resolve with the assistance of an organisation like Relate, but they haven't been able to. But the role of Relate doesn't feature too heavily in terms of non-court dispute resolution, because their role is to, like counsellors, as I understand, a marriage guidance counsellor.
So you won't require me to have gone and done something like that?
No.
It's not an obstacle.
It's a personal decision for you whether or not you do that, and of course whether your spouse or partner is amenable to that. One person might want to go and see someone and the other person doesn't.